So welcome everyone to kind of a new format of the Behind the Mixer podcast, which is now in video as well. So I have joining me Brian Gowing and Richard Gaspard, who's from PreSonus. So let me just go ahead and turn it over to Brian, because Brian knows Richard already from a mutual friend. Go, Brian.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be doing this new format. We'll see how it works out. Part of what we want to do is the Behind the Mixer group has a lot of people in there, ranging from just end users also to vendors and manufacturer reps. And part of this is to also get to the heart of the people that are serving us in as a vendor and as a manufacturer. And if you don't know PreSonus, they've been around for quite a few years, and I'll have Richard touch on that a little bit later. But I want for you to get to know the heart of the people that are actually selling some of the products that we use and love. So, Richard, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. Hopefully, people will get to know you a little bit better. Richard is the House of Worship Market Manager for PreSonus. Richard, how long have you been doing this now for them?
I've been in that role. First of all, thank you guys both for having me as your guest today. I really appreciate all that you guys do. I've been in the role of House of Worship Market Manager officially since October 1st of 2019. I was PreSonus's product specialist for 2 years before that, and working a lot with churches, with houses of worship within the guise of the product specialist position. Them knowing that I was a ministry guy, they kind of had me doing a few of those things as well. But officially, October of 2019.
Cool. Go ahead and just give us a little bit of your background, Richard. Let's talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about your story. Because I remember when we first met and you told me your story. It's a very compelling, very personal, very deep story, and I think people would like to know that to talk about. I know it's probably not going to be easy for you, and I appreciate you willing to share that.
Yeah, certainly, man. So I'm no stranger to ministry. I've been involved in ministry in some form or another since 1983, 84, something like that. That says how old I am. But so, I went to Bible college for a year. I was on staff at a really large church for about 14 years. And in 2015, my youngest daughter, Katie, had some really serious health concerns, and she had a form of leukemia. She had a bone marrow transplant in August of 2015. And then I was on a 5-month sabbatical from my church. The pastor and the board just gave me just complete time off to go and take care of Katie. I live in Lafayette, Louisiana, and this was at Texas Children's Hospital in Houston. And her transplant was a success, but then around Christmas of 2015, she started feeling bad again, and in January of 2016, we were given the diagnosis of what's called graft versus host disease. Her new immune system from her bone marrow transplant, which cured the form of leukemia that she had, it was attacking her organs, and that was a very, very lengthy process in the hospital. She was in the hospital from January 5th, 2016, all the way through Thanksgiving time of 2016.
Uh-huh.
And then in and out of the hospital for the next 9 months until basically the treatments for the graft versus host disease caught up to her, and it resulted in her passing in July of 2017. She was just shy of her 17th birthday, and miss her terribly. But Katie was just the most amazing young woman. She loved the Lord from day one. embarrassingly so sometimes. She would strike up conversations about faith with just, random strangers but just so proud of the young woman that I was seeing, her grow to be, and just so proud of the way she fought this illness and the effects of the treatment through all of it. My wife and I resigned our positions. Like I said, I was a media director of a really large church, and in February of 2016, I resigned my position there and moved to Houston and just worked as a musician, worked as a church consultant guy whenever I could get the work. But put my entire career on hold to just be a daddy and to be with her. Probably one of the best decisions of my life, to just lay the career goals and those aspirations aside and just fulfill my second and third calling. One first being a Christ follower, second being a husband, and third being a daddy. And I did that full time. And so while we were there in Houston, and to go back several years, I was a PreSonus user for a number of years. And at the church that I was on staff at, when I first got there, they had some pieces of PreSonus gear, and I thought they were good. And I developed a relationship with some of the guys there at PreSonus. And while we were in Houston, that product specialist job had come up in April of 2017. And when Katie passed away and we said that we were moving back to the area, PreSonus is an hour away from my house, that I was told that job was available. And a couple of interviews later, and now, I went to work there. And it's interesting that you take a ministry guy who leaves ministry not because he hates ministry or he's defrocked or has a moral failure or whatever. I left ministry to take care of my family, only to turn around to get a job at a secular company. And then 2 years later, my job is now to resource ministry from the guys of a secular company.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been really fulfilling to me, is that with the church being so close to my heart, and knowing that was going to always be involved in ministry, on some level. Not necessarily pulpit ministry, although we do travel and speak at churches. Haven't in a while because of obvious situations, but being able to serve the church in whatever it is that I do, and now I'm able to do it vocationally through a secular company, and that's been an interesting thing to just stop and think about, and just really appreciate how God leads you. And the little cartoon that says, "This was my plan," but God's plan was all of this. So I've definitely experienced all of those twists and turns in the roller coaster, for sure.
So I know you and your wife started a foundation after Katie's death. Talk about that a little bit and what it is.
So it's called the Still Rising Foundation, and we got our name from there was a group of college students who were going around room to room at Texas Children's, who were they basically showed up with a little Apple laptop, an SM58, and an interface, and they would record songs with the little kids. Well, Katie was 14 when this happened, and she was already a guitar player, songwriter, singer. She was, helping lead worship in the youth group at our church. So it's kind of like, those college student girls who walked in kind of didn't know what hit them, because Katie was already a songwriter. And so she wrote this song called Still Rising, and it was really kind of telling her story, not recognizing who she had become and all of those things. And after her passing, well, during the journey, we had developed a bit of a following on social media, and my wife's blog and all of that. It was our ability to just put our thoughts down. And after Katie passed, we were encouraged by several folks, pulpit and non-pulpit ministry folks, and just friends and people who know our story, to write a book. And so we wrote a book, and in looking for the title, we went back to the song. And so the song was called Still Rising. So that became the title of the book, which also became the name of the foundation, the Still Rising Foundation. And the Still Rising Foundation just seeks to honor Katie's memory. And by doing good things, we've helped out bone marrow transplant families at Texas Children's, because that was the big procedure that she had. We've donated probably by now almost $20,000 in cash and non-cash type contributions to families directly at Texas Children's. We've started a scholarship fund for young women who want to go to ministry school, because Katie wanted to go to ministry school. And last year, actually 2019 and 2020, we gave our first, the inaugural Katie Mack Still Rising scholarship to a young woman who is currently in the school that Katie wanted to go to. Katie would be finishing up her first year at this school, and this young woman would have been in her class. And come to find out, after we awarded the scholarship, this young woman was actually in Katie's 8th grade homeroom before Katie got sick.
Really? That's awesome.
Huge full circle moment. And so we'll be doing more of that. Again, that scholarship is exclusive to young women who want to go to ministry school. And they can apply for it by just contacting us. It's info@wearestillrising.com. Wearestillrising.com is the name of the website. It's not a great website, so don't get your hopes up when you it's currently in the process of being redone, and but it at least got us an online presence. But yeah, that's what we're doing. And I travel and speak mostly at churches nationwide, and we tell our story. We raise money for the foundation. We sell books, and just want to be a source of hope for folks, because it doesn't matter your gender, your race, your social status. If you've lived long enough, you've faced suffering. And our message is, in a nutshell, that only real faith can say, I'm more than a conqueror, and though he slay me, yet will I serve him, in the same breath. And we've had the mountaintop moments, and we've also obviously experienced life in the valley, and we know that God's been with us through all of it, and He's never ceased to be good. And so that's really our message when we speak.
Cool. I appreciate you sharing that. I know it's not easy. I know the wound is still there. God, as usual, can make roses out of, garbage. Glad Katie's memory is doing some good.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Chris, did you want to say something? I wasn't sure.
No, I think you pretty much said everything I would have said.
Okay, sorry.
Sometimes like that, I'm just more of a hugger, and I can't do that now anywhere.
Yeah. And it would look kind of awkward doing it over the computer, so we're not going to do that.
Oh, why not? Hug.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, Richard, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Now, for something not completely different. So, what in your role of House of Worship Market Manager? I know the title kind of says it, but what jazzes you about your job?
So I think the thing that makes me most excited is, I just alluded to that earlier, is that I get to, from my position at the manufacturer, resource ministry. And I see it in a number of ways. First of all, yes, my job is to sell mixers and speakers and software and all of that. But to get to resource churches, ministries who are going to use it for what they're going to use it for, really, gets me excited. Also, just the idea of, we've all seen if you've been in ministry for any length of time, especially in the technical arts, you've seen your fair share of the nefarious dealer people who will come in and tell you what you think you need. They'll buy it from a big box place, and they will show up, do a terrible installation, and split. And you're left holding the bag on something that is not what you needed. And I know I've personally seen a few of those nefarious characters who have tried to show up where at my former place of employment at the church I was at. But I feel like one of the things I get to do is protect churches and ministries from that kind of thing. If I'm involved in a situation, obviously from the manufacturer standpoint, we have reps, we have dealers and integrators. We're only going to use PreSonus authorized folks, guys who are a part of our dealer network, that we have vetted them through the process of their application into the process of becoming a dealer, those kinds of things. So that's one thing, is I get to protect churches from the shadiness that's out there. And the other thing is just being able to be involved in the process of helping a church with their audio solution. One of the things that I've always prided myself on was the ability to solve problems. And when I resigned from the church in February of 2016, I was told by the children's pastor at the very next staff meeting, they were all talking about the public resignation. The pastor brought my wife and I. My wife, coincidentally, was the women's ministry director of the church for 9 years. So they brought us up in front of the congregation at every service. They do 3 Sunday morning services, and they were talking about the crowd's reaction to it, and we just had such an amazing support from our church. We're still members of that. We moved back in town. I do all their post-production audio. I'm one of their bass. My wife's one of the worship leaders. But anyway, in the very next staff meeting, the children's pastor told me they were in the debrief. They were talking about the announcement of us leaving and how that went. And in the middle of it, he said the pastor got really serious and said, "Guys, pray for me, because the realization is hitting me that I no longer have Richard Gaspard here to solve all of our problems." And that meant the world to me. And so, I get an amazing amount of personal fulfillment to just help people sort out the stuff. And so being able to see a problem and offer a solution and work with them through that is just, on a personal level, very fulfilling. And then when you tie it into the fact that we're doing this ultimately for a higher purpose and not just selling stuff, moving product. If I were just moving product, I would just, I would just view that as a job. But this is a little bit higher than that for me. And so I would say that that's probably the biggest part that really gets me jazzed, is being able to know that I'm helping and helping really churches do what they do with the stuff that we offer.
All right. Okay, cool. All right. I'm going to bet there's some people out there that have probably never heard of PreSonus or have very limited knowledge that they have an audio box, a USB audio box or two, and they don't really know what all, Yep. That's what I've got too. Trying to think, it's kind of like an SM57. If you don't have one of these around, it's just not going to do anything. But kind of talk a little bit about PreSonus, like, how long have they been around? Kind of what are their major product lines, and that kind of thing.
So PreSonus was founded 25 years ago, and they've been actually an industry leader in a lot of respects. The first real digital compact mixer. Everyone using a digital networked mixer is mixing on an iPad or a laptop wirelessly. PreSonus invented wireless mixing. We cover so much of the product line within the audio world, mixers, interfaces. We sell the fastest interface on the planet, the Quantum, which is a Thunderbolt interface. So, mixers, interfaces, studio controllers, studio monitors, PA speakers, um, microphones, just really, a total audio solution company. And everything from just the little 2-channel audio box. Actually, remember I said that I had stuff before I even started working there. I bought that in like 2015 or 2016, when I was just doing some home recording when we were living in Houston. But you know, everything from the smallest, $99 audio box type interface all the way up to stadium speakers. Our Works speaker system, is meant to be able to compete with the biggest manufacturers, the real high end systems. So there's something there along the way, for everyone. And our Studio Live Series 3 mixer systems really, and I don't say this because I work for PreSonus, I say this because I know the market. I mean, it really is the most feature laden and capable and networkable and expandable system out there in its price class, and in price classes 3 times our size. So it's a tremendous value for the person purchasing it, and again, all of our pieces are meant to be expandable, modular, that kind of thing. In the mixer and some of our speakers, and so there's that value there, and especially in the church market, a church can begin with a rack mixer and a couple of speakers, and then as they move into a larger room, that rack mixer becomes a stage box. And then you take those 2 speakers, and some of them are actually modular, they're arrayable. And we just wanted to try to create products that not only sound great and are great, but are affordable, relatively speaking.
Cool. One thing I forgot to mention in the beginning, just so that everybody's clear on this, PreSonus is not a sponsor. They're not paying for this. We decided to do that, or more correctly, me and my big mouth decided to do this and convinced Chris to do that, just so that people can get a feel for manufacturers and vendors. If the response is pretty decent on this one, that you guys want to keep doing this, we'll try to find more of similar minded folks that would like to participate in this thing. Okay, Richard, I was going to ask you this. So I started recommending the digital mixers when PreSonus first came out with their Series 1 or whatever, the original PreSonus mixers. When they first came out, they were, there was nothing else that could touch that. And then, of course, we entered the age of the X32. And right about then, there were some issues that started coming up with the initial PreSonus digital mixers. At that point, I kind of stopped recommending them, honestly, because, the churches that I was putting them in were, after a couple of years would be going, hey, there's some kind of heat soak issue or something with this thing. And then I know PreSonus tried with second generation mixers, and they were still struggling a little bit with all the other mixers at that point that were coming out had, the digital scribble strips. They had the motorized faders, and PreSonus stayed away from that. It seemed like PreSonus wasn't really wanting to kind of almost compete at that level with the other mixers. And the Series 3, and for everybody who doesn't know it yet, I have a Series 3 in our church, and we also have the 24R rack mount mixer that we use as a stage box. I like it a lot. What we changed out of was a different manufacturer. And I think the sweet spot for the PreSonus Series 3 mixers, if you're talking in terms of competitors, would probably definitely be the Behringer, the X32, probably the Q Series from Allen Heath, probably the SQ Series as well. I don't know enough about the small Soundcraft mixers to say anything. And I'm thinking even what the small Yamaha mixers, right, Richard? I mean, is that kind of what the sweet spot is, or the competitors for the Series 3?
So all of our mixers, all of our desktop mixers are 32 channels, with the exception of the 64S, which is 64. By itself, it's a 32 channel, 16 out, plus left, center, right. But it's expandable up to 64 by combining it with stage boxes or other mixers, rack or desktop. But just because you have a 32SC, which is the 17 fader, 16 faders in the one master, and it's not a 16 channel mixer. It's a 32 channel mixer. In the way you upgrade the 64S to a 64, you can add a stage box to the 32SC, and you have a 32 channel mixer. Feature for feature, they're all the same. It's the same fat channel processing. It's the same touchscreen and all of that. The 64S is just double the processing power. And so, and the 64S was another industry first. We were the first 64 input, 32 output plus left, center, right mixer on the market in the sub, I think it's, don't quote me on this, but it's like in the sub $12,000 or $13,000 category. And I mean, a fully loaded out in a 64 channel configuration with a couple of stage boxes or a 32R rack mixer, we're talking barely scratching a little over $6,000. And so when you look at things in our price class, in that $3,000 to $5,000 range, we have features, as I kind of mentioned before, we have features that compete with mixers that are in that $11,000 to $15,000 price class. And and so, and that's obviously very intentional. We wanted to take back that market share. We wanted to take back the the reputation of being a leader in that lane. And so that's what Series 3 was all about.
We get a lot of people that ask us, well, what kind of mixer should I get? I mean, that is their question right there. That's the end of the question. And we respond with, of course, well, it depends. Now let's talk about all your needs, your future needs, what your current setup is. That's why when, even I look at everything that's on the market now, it's like when somebody says, well, which one is the best? It's like, well, it all depends on what you want and what you need.
Yeah, for sure. I would agree with that. We've tried to, I mean, our engineers are brilliant, and we've tried to make a product that meets as much of the needs as we possibly can, without breaking the bank, being able to do things. And if I may speak to that just for a second, as a former media director of a church, and this is a big church, there were like 5,000 people that attended there, or considered it their church when I left. I had budget. There were years where I had lots of budget, but I always filtered my purchases through the idea of tools versus toys.
Right.
I may be wrong in this assessment, and you guys can speak to this, and please correct me if I am wrong, but I don't know if there's a bigger spirit of keeping up with the Joneses alive in the world today than in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Church down the street gets a CL5, you need a CL5. Or whatever, piece of gear. I didn't spend a whole lot of money in the tech world until we built the 1,500 seat auditorium, and then my portion of it was a little under $1 million. Now, it was fun to spend $1 million, but and now this was 2011, so the technology, that's an eternity ago in the tech world. There are things that I had to spend $50,000 on that literally a mixer that I had to spend over $50,000 on, that a 64S at the fully loaded at like $6,000 could do, and actually do better than the 2011 version of what we bought. So I think, as people purchasing money for churches, and the other thing that I used to think about a lot was This is money being entrusted to me that came into our budget through people entrusting it to us through their giving by tithing and extra offerings. And so for me, that money was holy money. This was people giving as unto God, trusting us to spend it wisely. And so I had friends, or colleagues who were spending money on stuff just because it was just the end thing, or just as a status symbol. And I didn't want to do that. I bought what we needed. I bought things that would get the job done and all of that. And so, there was always a frugalness that I approached my purchases with when I was in that role of a media director, that I really appreciate how PreSonus, I guess, stokes and massages that part of my thinking. It's not features for feature's sake. It's features that you will actually use. It's, we've had people say, well, why aren't you doing a 96K mixer? And my response to that is, can you tell me the difference between 48K and 96K through a set of PA speakers? Can you tell me the difference between 48 and 96 through a $20,000 set of Westlake studio monitors? And so 96K, we could build a 96K mixer, but it would be more expensive. And we wanted to keep it at an affordable price point. We wanted to put other features that were more useful to the user on the back end than those buzzwordy things. And so I think people, when they're weighing what they want to get, when they ask the question of what's the best mixer, I 100% agree with you, Chris, is that the best mixer is the thing that's going to do what you need it to do. But I think we get lost in the weeds and get caught up in those things that are buzzwordy, or just because the church down the street got this, that's what you have to get. Again, that's just that's been my philosophy for the last 2 decades of being in ministry, and how I made purchases. And PreSonus has that real pragmatic approach to things, and we're gonna pack features you're gonna actually use into our stuff, and not just for the sake of saying, we could build a mixer that does 192K, but is that really useful in a live environment?
Right. Now, one of the things when it comes to walking into a church, and they'll say, hey, we'd like to get a new mixer because the sound's really suffering in here, and we think a new mixer is going to sound good. I'll look at them, and then I'll look up at the ceiling at their speakers and say, how old are the speakers?
Right.
Because sometimes, if on a very small budget, I'm going to say, put your money there and save up for something else. Or if you're going to do this right. And if it's been that long, let's do a whole system renovation. Could you speak on that?
Yeah, I would actually take it a few steps farther. I've done a lot of clinic type work where I've gone in and worked with a worship team or the tech team, the creatives and stuff. And he is now a PreSonus employee, but a gentleman by the name of Joe Gilder, who runs he had a Home Studio Corner, I think is the name of his YouTube channel. He's now PreSonus's software product specialist. When I moved over to House of Worship, we split my job into hardware and software, and we hired Joe. But Joe does this thing. He actually sells T-shirts that says GIRATS and with periods between them. Get it right at the source. And that's actually a spiritual application if you really want to get it. But anyway, does your bass player and drummer play well together? is your guitar tuned? Did you change the drum heads? What kind of microphones are you using? For me, it's a holistic approach. And I appreciate what you said about, well, how old are these speakers? Yeah, we tend to look at things and go, we need new, we need new. And yes, sometimes we do need new, but just because we swap out a piece of gear doesn't mean that we solve the problem. And I always try to encourage the people in leadership, when you do a new piece of gear or when you make a change, make a policy change, because it's the new way of doing things. So sneak in a policy change like, hey, we're going to get more intentional about our guitar sounds, or hey, we're going to get more intentional about playing less. And I mean, we've heard guys who just, it's a bunch of eighth notes and 16th notes. And it can become cacophonous if you don't do it right. There's only a certain very, very small percentage of the folks who can do that really well. And they're not church volunteers. They're professional guys. And so I think, again, I like to think of it as a holistic thing. You want the right microphones on the right sources. You want to make sure that you're eliminating hum, that you're using good direct boxes, that you're, take a look at your cables, all of those things. And, just doing the best with what you have and starting from there. The solution isn't always just throwing money at things. Or you may, like I said, need something new, but use that as a time to change the way you're doing things, and your results get even better than just replacing the one piece.
Right. So, Richard, let's just staying on the Series 3 for a little bit. I think there's a tendency in the church world, to look at what the pros are doing, or the not necessarily just the bigger churches, but what they're using out in the touring world and stuff. Correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't seen a whole lot of the PreSonus equipment on, I guess, a tour status. Has that been pretty intentional of PreSonus to stay out of that area?
Well, one of the biggest things that kept us out of the tour circuit was when we were topping out at 32 channels, because a lot of larger productions were wanting to go 48 or 40. And so with the advent of the 64S, which is about a year ago, maybe a little less than a year ago when it came out, we actually got on a few tours with groups using the 64S. It's become a more rider friendly piece of gear. But there again, so let's just talk about the rider situation. When I was at Crossroads, this church I was on staff at, we hosted a lot of concerts through like the Air One tour and just things like that. I would get those riders, and every single one of them had requests for like whatever, and I would respond with what we had, and no one ever balked at that. So, I mean, of course, we had an Avid venue, and we had Nexo line arrays. So that was, starting off right there with a pretty impressive high-end system. But when they were asking about other things, I'm like, I don't have that, but we have this. And they were completely okay with it. So I think people, again, that's another thing that we get bogged down in. But, ultimately, your gear's got to work for what it is that you want to do. And, I think that, and I can't speak for all professionals, because these guys and ladies are crazy hardworking folks. But, sometimes we look at that high end stuff and it becomes a status symbol. Really what all this stuff is tools. And, does it get the job done? I spoke at this church in San Antonio recently. I was back in February, and the pastor has a phrase, "Getmo." good enough. Let's move on. And I've done a bunch of studio work as a producer, as an engineer, as a bass player. And I mean, I can play bass on a tune, and I can do it 1,000 different ways. But the listener at home never knows the other 999 ways I could have gone with the tune. I play what's right for the song, a couple of riffs here and there for the people paying attention that go, he can play. And then, but I do what's right for the particular song. And so I think folks who, I could be way out in left field. It's just the way I think. I just think, this is, I'm not, I don't want to be showy with money. I don't want to be like all status symbol-y and everything. I just want to do a good job and do right by the people I'm working for. And so yeah, our stuff hasn't really been out there on tour a lot, but it's largely because of the touring companies. They've needed more channels than what we've been able to provide in the past. That's changing though. We have gotten the 64S on, a few of the tours, and, hope to see more.
Cool. Yeah, I can tell you. I know. Oh, sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, to add to that, I was just thinking about, exactly the level of gear. I visited a church, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, and they did a remodel. I noticed they had a really nice high-end console in there. So I figured, okay, just part of their model. And I asked their sound guy, how it was and how it sounded in the room. And he said, well, it's kind of hard to say because none of us really know how to use it. And they never taught us. And it turned out their small team of audio guys weren't even doing much with the console that they had before. So in that case, they were clearly oversold a console.
Yeah, so going back to my initial thing about weeding out the dudes who take advantage of churches. When you're spending $25,000, $30,000 on a mixer, you got to ask yourself, what's the guy who's just sold that to me's margin on that? Obviously, it's going to be a lot more than when you bought a $5,000 mixer.
Right.
Did I just really need to spend an extra 20 grand on features that I'm not going to use? And there again, so going back to the mixer that we bought at the church that I was on staff at, I don't even know how to use it to this day. I had guys who were trained to come in and do it. The first time that I saw him working on this venue, I'm like, man, this is a spaceship, and so that's the other thing. You buy this high-end gear, you got to have the people who know what they're doing to be able to operate it. The smaller mixers that do everything you want them to do. And I'm not talking about just PreSonus. I'm talking about the ones in our price class. You don't have to be a certified, degreed or whatever audio engineer to operate them. Much more user-friendly, much more set up to where a volunteer can learn it pretty quick and get on it. So that's an excellent point. For me, I would be really embarrassed if I were the media director of a church and my volunteer sound guys made that kind of comment. I would feel like I really, really wasted God's money in that purchase.
Yeah, his exact words were, "It's a very expensive volume control," and that was tough to hear. That was tough to hear.
Yeah. Again, I got strong opinions, I guess.
Yeah. Now,
it all stems from just wanting to be accountable with money that people are trusting you with. That's really where it boils down to, for me, feeling that one day I'm going to have to answer for that, which scares the daylights out of me.
Yeah. This is the part where I then ask you what version of iPhone you have, but I'm not going to do that. I'll skip.
Actually, I have an 11. I didn't get an 11 Pro, and I only got this because my ex, and this is actually PreSonus's phone. This isn't mine, but my ex, which I had for 2 years, suddenly just died, and we couldn't revive it, so I got the new one. So there you go. I'm not an early adopter. I'm rolling with a 2015 MacBook Pro. Look, man, I mean, I'm not one of those dudes who just, now I do have Catalina on it, but it took me, I don't know, Catalina's been out since what, November or something.
Yeah.
I just put Catalina on this a month ago.
Oh, oh God.
I'm not one of those dudes, man.
Yeah, I've got a friend of mine that he is one of those dudes, and I'm just like, whatever.
Well, no, I
Whatever.
used to be. Okay, so I used to be one of these guys where, the software update had to do it, had to do it, had to do it. Well,
Oh,
I learned my lesson at the church. We were still in our old building, about a 450 seat auditorium. I had an iMac that was running ProPresenter, and there was an Apple update. After I had proofed my videos for the weekend, you can see where this is going.
Mm-hmm.
I approved my videos for the weekend. I see the software update. I'm like, well, of course I want that. And I loaded it, got to church Saturday night, and my operator goes, hey, none of these videos are working. And so I'm freaking out. I happen to get somebody at Renewed Vision on the phone, the guys who make ProPresenter. And the guy's like, you put that new QuickTime update on your computer, didn't you? Yeah. And he's like, we don't support it. We didn't know that was coming out until it came out. So he walked me through the process of going back to the earlier version of QuickTime. And I mean, like, within minutes before, and I was playing bass that night. So it was like, I couldn't devote a whole lot of time to do it. So that's when that was probably 2007. And at that point I was like, okay, computers for presentation are appliances. They do the one thing. And is it working? Leave it alone.
yeah.
Don't be all like software update hog on the stuff, man. It doesn't work. It works, good. Just don't touch it.
Now, what are maybe some other mistakes you see churches do on a regular basis where you walk in and feel like you just need to correct some basic fundamental problems they have?
This doesn't have anything to do with the technical thing, but I think one of the things that I do when I go in and do a clinic or something is I'll ask everyone, and I love it when worship pastors are a part of this, because I'll ask everyone, what's your role here? The drummer will be like, well, I play drums for worship, blah, 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 blah. The worship pastors, I lead the everybody into the presence of the Lord, and I just go, hey guys, I appreciate all of your answers. You're wrong. Your function here is to fulfill the role, is to fulfill the vision of your pastor. You just happen to do it by playing drums or leading worship. But honestly, a newcomer has already decided if they're coming back after they have met up with the parking attendant or the nursery worker before they even hear the band. And for whatever reason, and I can say this because I'm one of the guys, I'm an onstage person. We kind of feel like what we do is more important. And really, I mean, again, the newcomer was the parking attendant, the guy parking the cars. Was he nice? Did he have a smile on his face? Was it easy to check their child into the nursery or the children's ministry? Was that a pleasant experience? They've already made up their mind whether they're coming back before I get a chance to deal them with my amazing bass playing, worship bass playing one note at a time, but I see that, and that has nothing to do with gear, but I see that kind of heart that, and I will say this, I'm seeing that breaking, around places I go where the music guys are having a more servant oriented and others oriented lifestyle, or at least mental mentality, about it. So that's one thing that I've noticed in the past is that, we tend to think that what we do is more important than what the other people serving. And, and we tend to want to be glorified in it. I mean, isn't that what kind of brought Satan down? Was the pride in his own ability and all of that, and made himself to be God. But I think on the technical side, I'm, like I said before, I'm all for buying things in a practical and pragmatic way. But I am every bit of my intensity geared towards that. I'm also just as intense about not cheaping out. So case in point, if I'm in a room that I don't have full lighting control over it, I'm not going to buy a 3,000 lumen projector or lower.
Right.
I'm gonna buy the brightest projector I can find because it's got to cut through the ambient light coming through. You know, that's like just things like that. I never, although I was always pragmatic, I never settled for stuff. I did without until we had the budget to do what it was what we needed to do. And I understand though. I mean, some churches don't have a large budget. They got to do they got to do what they have to do with what they have. And I don't want to take that away from anyone. But just because it's at a certain price point doesn't mean it's the right decision. And so that's one thing that I do notice, that we tend to think cheap instead of thinking for the right solution that might also be inexpensive. Another thing that I see is just, and I don't want to rail on anyone or say that they're not doing the right things. I think they're ill-advised, because it's not the pastor's job to know about crosstalk or not crosstalk, comb filtering. It's not his job to know about that. Poorly placed speakers, things that weren't really installed correctly, and hence my sensitivity to want to protect churches. Like I said when we first started this discussion, just things that aren't done well, and when you take something that is done cheap and then add into the fact that it wasn't done well, then it's just not good. You can take something that is inexpensive but works and use it effectively, and it's effective. I mean, we've all seen that, right? So those are just kind of some of the things I see on the technical end, but I tend to want to focus more on the hearts of people than just the stuff that they have that they're working with. Obviously, I want people to buy our stuff. I think it's good, and I think I think it's the best in its price class. But it can't always be about that for me, because I'm not. I don't want to be just that guy who's forever hawking PreSonus. I want people to know me as a person who legitimately cares about what they're doing, and wants to see them grow as a team and do the best with with what they have.
Yeah. So when somebody leaves that, after their time with you, it's one thing to say, yes, he helped us get us all this new gear, but it's something else to say, and he also helped us grow as a team or as a church, or brought some insight that we hadn't seen before. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, like, in that protecting churches thing, I always tell people that I talk with, I mean, it's not this way because we're all working from home, but, I tell people my office is 30 feet away from the head of tech support. And, being able to have a position where I can be that back end resource if something's going wrong, without somebody having to call, without someone having to use tech support as their first line when something goes wrong, they can call me, and I can talk them through it. I mean, the ecosystem that Brian has, there have been a couple of things where, he, being new to the Series 3, he just texted me and said, "Hey man, how do I do this?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, blah 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 blah." Or if I didn't know, I was like, "I'll figure it out and get back to you." It's those things that I try to do with my position as well. I'm not here just to sell mixers.
Right.
I'm here to help churches, and I think there are a lot of people who view sales as just making a buck and then getting out of there, when I'm much more interested in the relationship aspect and making sure that someone is happy years after they made the purchase from me.
Yeah, definitely. I'm disappointed that Brian couldn't figure it out himself.
He's a sharp
Hey,
guy.
it was
He's a
close.
sharp guy, but sometimes,
Hey,
tech gets the best of us. What was it?
hey, Richard,
I think
since
you
you,
had a problem. You had a problem finding the master fader. Is that what it was, or something like that?
yeah, it was. It was like, oh, that thing in the front. I got it.
You want to know what that thicker black line across all the faders section was? What that was? I don't know.
Yep. I was wondering what those bouncy lights meant.
The
What's
bouncy
up?
light.
Hey, Richard, since you're only 30 feet from the tech support guy, offline editor and channel attenuators, baby. And stuff. Um, yeah, this has been a great conversation. So, Chris, should we try to do a lightning round?
Oh
And
my
you're going,
gosh.
what's that? Yeah.
Well, yes.
Okay.
Who has the questions?
I don't know. I'm just going to throw one out. Peanut
Clearly,
butter or
I'm gonna
hot
ask
sauce?
you guys. Clearly, I'm going to ask you guys the questions. Is that what it is?
Oh,
No. It doesn't work that way. We're hosting this. So, Richard, peanut butter or hot sauce?
Depends on what I'm eating, but peanut butter for sure. If it's by itself, peanut butter all the way.
oh, peanut butter every time.
Okay. All right, Chris, you can throw one out, and then we'll stop it because it'll be stupid by the time we're done with this.
Okay. Is it me or do only cool people have beards?
Ha ha ha!
Oh, man.
And that aren't bald. Is that what you're going with?
Well,
let's not. I mean, let's.
But there's still some turf. There's still some tundra up there, guys.
So hey,
This is like the desert.
when I was in college, I had hair down the middle of my back. I could pull my bangs like to here. I had like all this hair. But I remember, I knew I was getting old when Katie, our youngest, she came home one day and she had drawn I come home and she had drawn a picture of me, and it was my head was round and there was like a little oval at the top of my head. And I didn't know what that was. I was like, oh baby, that's such a great, and she cut me off. And as I was talking, that's such a great, that's your bald spot.
Out of the mouths of babes.
Yeah, she was probably like 3 or 4. I'm like, ouch.
yeah. My tough one was a couple years ago when I was back in the production room and we were looking over some footage of the earlier service, and they had done a wide shot from the very back of the sanctuary so they could actually see me. I'm right there in the corner, and the stage is out front. And I'm like, oh, it's kind of must have been a weird light right on top of my head, kind of doing a weird reflection off my hair. And all the guys in the room just looked at me and they said, there's no hair there.
That hurts.
Yeah.
That's your best friends there, buddy.
All right, best lightning round question.
Speaking the truth in love.
When you're hungry for a snack, what do you go for?
Wait, I missed that. There was a little glitch in the.
Oh, sure. I said, when you're hungry for a snack, what do you go for?
There's not anything that my wife leaves in the house that I would go for, but pretzels. But
With hot sauce. See?
that's got too many carbs and white flour. We don't eat that anymore, apparently.
Unless we just happen to be at the gas station.
She's in the next room, and I don't think. But yeah, it'd be pretzels.
So if something comes flying across the screen, we'll know why. Richard, this has been fun and informative. I hope people listening have as much fun as we had doing that. If people want to reach you for some discussion, how do they get a hold of you?
You can. I'm on Facebook. Actually, facebook.com/Richard Gaspard, Gaspard. I'm the administrator of PreSonus House of Worship, which is our Facebook group there. If you're a PreSonus user and you're in the worship space, please go request to be added to that group. I'm the admin. I will be the one who would add you to it. My email is rgaspard, Gaspard, @PreSonus.com. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anyone's having, and particularly if they're interested in expanding their system or doing anything in the audio world. Yeah, that's how they can get a hold of me.
Richard, in the short time I've known you, I have enjoyed getting to know you more and and I consider you a good friend.
Appreciate
We've had some pretty neat discussions, even texting or even, calling and stuff. And you've always been a straight shooter, no matter what question I've asked. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be on here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let Chris wrap it up for us because he's usually the one that talks more and I don't. So I'm not used to this.
Well, I'm probably the most verbose person I know. So, my
All
wife
right.
tells me that all the time. I promise you, we're gonna get off this call. I'm gonna walk in the living room and she's gonna say, "Man, you can talk." I guarantee that's about to happen. And there will be no pretzels to console me.
On that note, thank you, Richard, for joining us on the Behind the Mixer podcast. Thank you, Brian, as well. For anybody who's interested in PreSonus, there's all different ways you can get a hold of Richard. Of course, always ask us. And if you're interested, check out behindthemixer.com. Thank you all for joining us, and goodbye.